Oh, wait up, Happy. Taking a walk today at the park with my dog. And she's in a hurry. Thinking about what's happening in my life right now and the amount of family nepotism and corruption that I'm dealing with locally at the moment. And I'm getting ready to go to court again tomorrow because I was assaulted by 3 men on public property, on a public road. And these 3 men are supported by corrupt police that work for the corrupt courthouse, the corrupt police department. And ever since I was a little boy, I've been living with a lazy eye that I was born with. And my little sister has one as well, and it's a lot worse than mine. And they've used this facial deformity to discriminate against me my whole life. They've called me gay. They've called me crazy. They've called me a psychopath simply because my eyes don't focus properly. I'm a victim of my own blindness. And to sit back and watch a corrupt community in downstate Illinois, a Trump town, use these deformities and disabilities as an excuse to facilitate corrupt actions by the local courthouse. There's literally nothing I can do but bitch and cry on the internet about it. At this point, everyone has come together at the courthouse, to include my defense attorney and the police, into refusing service. So even when I called to complain about improper police action, wrongful arrest, when I called to complain about illegitimate court actions meant to drive up a criminal record, I met with silence. And this silence is to facilitate the family bureaucracy in town so that they may continue on their corrupt path, ruining our judicial system in the process and giving special rights and treatment to their own friends and family and co-workers. The problem started about 4 years ago when I purchased a home in what we thought was a good part of Marshall. And over the last 4 years, our neighbors have passed away, and they've been replaced by local slumlords who have come in and snatched up these properties at very cheap prices, less than $10,000 per house. And they've rented these houses out to individuals that bring crime into the neighborhood. And they've been facilitated by my neighbors who belong to a family that has connections with the local university. They have connections to the police department in town. The neighbor on the backside of my house is an ex-courthouse employee. So what's happened is over the last 4 years, my neighbors have used these connections to single me out from the herd and to beat me, to assault me, to vandalize our home and our vehicles so that they can call the police in to corruptly use their badges as an excuse to get me in trouble instead. Over the years, I've called the police I don't know how many times to report vandalisms and assaults, and it's always the same thing. They won't help. They refuse to help, take reports. They refuse to do anything to further any kind of allegations or a case that I may make. And they've even gone so far as to slap me with restraining orders and order of protection to keep my mouth shut while they continue to abuse me. This scam now includes members of our local courthouse because they are a party to this, because my neighbor, like I said, is an ex-employee, and he has gone to court to petition the judge to have this special right to continue this abuse. And this neighbor that worked for the courthouse has an abandoned property behind us that he allows these neighbors to come to protest our home, to cause a scene out in our backyard, hoping to draw us out of the home so that they can assault us and then trick us into a courtroom setting. Usually when the police come to our house to assault us or harass us, there's no warrant. They just come to the door and knock and demand to come in. And usually they drag me right out. They completely disrespect myself and my property to the point where they'll show up at my house with lights and sirens blaring just to portray me as a public criminal in the neighborhood. And the only thing I've done wrong is what I'm doing right here. Walking my puppy dog down the road, down a public road owned by the city. And even the city now is using that public road as an area where these neighbors can assault me, physically assault me, so that the police can come down and trick me into a courtroom setting. They're assisted by the local circuit clerk's office and the local district attorney's office because they work side by side with those people every day. So of course, they're going to use their badges to enforce arbitrary rules instead of actual laws, because there's just no avenue for a complaint to be issued. It's simply a denial of service, a phone gets hung up, and that's the end of the story. You have no choice but to plead guilty in a kangaroo court, because even the district attorney refuses to speak to the case with me. Instead, he would rather talk to my public defender, who is literally the only public defender in the county, who's responsible for 200 cases a month, and who doesn't even have time to see me in person to speak about the charges that I'm supposed to go to court on. And these charges stem from 3 separate wrongful arrests that have been made after I've been assaulted and left for dead on the road. And the cops come in to add insult to injury so they can arrest me and then sit around and laugh about it. I know I've been framed because the victims that the district attorney office claims to be innocent are actually the aggressors. And they will come to my home and brag that they framed me. And it's an inside joke in the town to the point now where they're even putting signs in their yards and shining spotlights on our home to harass us and to intimidate us into some sort of accidental situation where the police can once again be called in to act on this behalf of these neighbors that are using these corrupt police as a tool to discriminate me out of my home here in town. The first assault I suffered from was from my backyard neighbors driving a tractor into my swing set repeatedly, as to cause injury to the swing. And I stepped outside to ask them what was going on, and they immediately bum rushed me. There were 2 of them. They assaulted me in my backyard and then called the police in. The police came to my property. There was at least 6 police cars that day, acting like idiots in the neighborhood, driving crazy. They came to my door, banging on my door, told me if I didn't come out, they were going to search my house and arrest me. All because I stepped onto my own property to demand these people leave and, stop vandalizing my home. Well, to make a long story short, they used that case to harass me with their court system for a year over this misdemeanor assault charge. And at one point there was so many appointments that I simply got confused and missed a court date. And the corrupt judge, Lewis, actually sent a team of his policemen, if you can call them that, to my home, where they entered the property and drugged me out. They used an excuse to claim that I was resisting arrest. I had left a radio on, and they said, "Is there anything you need before we leave to take you to jail?" And I said, "Can I please turn my radio off?" And he said, "Sure." And I turned around and he said, "Good, now I got you for resisting arrest. I didn't tell you to go anywhere." And so that got me put into a situation where I was forced to remain in jail without bond until I finally pled guilty, because the judge knew that it was a circumstantial case built on evidence that was biased on behalf of the state. And they still tried to prosecute even though they had a lack of evidence. And by allowing me to sit in jail without bond, they could sweat a plea out of me so that I could plead guilty to a charge that I probably shouldn't have even been charged with in the first place, simply because it was a situation that I could have proved that it was biased. Because, like I said, my backyard is owned by courthouse employees. That was probably 3 years ago. I went on probation for a year, where they continued to harass me and treat me like a fugitive in town, bragging that their scams was what put me there in the first place. And as soon as I came off probation last January, I was instantly assaulted and nearly dragged out of my vehicle by individuals that were screaming and shouting obscenities at my home from a block away. They had been visiting this woman's house, another neighbor of mine, because we have a meth dealer that lives next to the city park I live next to, and they were simply in the neighborhood to procure drugs from these individuals. So now we have a problem where the police are not only supporting a case against me because they don't like me, but now they're supporting a case against me using known drug offenders in the community that they've already spoken to in the past and become friends with in the past, because they're involved in this corrupt system as well. 2 months later, the brother of this neighbor took it upon himself to assault me as I was walking my dog in front of his home. And like I said earlier, it's the same family that they have, oh God, I bet 5 households within 3 blocks that they've all bought, and they all live next to one another. His name is Henry Carpenter. And the woman neighbor, her name is Teresa Parker, and they are the estranged and disgraced family of Tony George Holman, who owns Rose Holman University, and the son of Ed Carpenter Sr., who was one of my harassers, is actually an Indy race car driver named Ed Carpenter Jr. And some of the reason why I'm forced to undergo all this harassment is because they have special corrupt connections in the local community based on this famous man that lives and, has a university in Terre Haute. Nothing happened from that one either. I was instantly arrested after I was nearly ran over and beaten in the road. Nothing ever happened to that guy, even though I shot everything on the video. I never walked on his private property. And they used trespassing charges as an excuse to get me into the courtrooms on this case, because there's no way to prove that I wasn't trespassing. So what they're doing is they're using their corrupt badges as evidence in this case and asking the judge to support a wrongful arrest charge by an officer simply because they're the police and we should respect and obey the police in our neighborhood. And I'm a bad guy now because I'm calling this arrest into question because there's no way to prove I was trespassing. Literally on the tape, you can see that there's no trespass being made. That, in turn, that corrupt police action in turn led to another incident 2 months down the road where this same man, Henry Carpenter, was at his home joking with City of Marshall employees while they were doing illegal work at his home. They were unclogging his toilet on city time off the books. I stepped out of my house to walk my dog, and I got a block away from my home before I was slandered by City of Marshall employees. And so when I got my phone out to record, I stepped into the street to see who was driving the vehicle, to see who the man was that was slandering me and cracking jokes, along with Henry Carpenter, who was also at the scene. And they struck me with their vehicle and drove off. And then they said some derogatory comment like, you know, stay out of the fucking road, you faggot. And I stopped right there in the road and tried to call 911. And the 911 officer, who's also a party to this, my town's got 3,000 people in it, it's not very big. They are already involved in this. And they refused to send an officer to assist me on my behalf. And I said on the phone to the dispatcher, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to stay here? What's going to go down? And I knew nothing was going to happen. So I, in turn, went down to the city garage here in Marshall, hoping that I could speak to a supervisor and file a complaint with them. And as soon as I showed up on the property, one of our local town supervisors, who also works for the city, that's another scam. He's got 3 or 4 paychecks from the same town. But he actually came out, threw water on me and started assaulting me, physically, mentally assaulting me, verbally harassing me. Refused to allow me the opportunity to file a complaint with the City of Marshall at the garage there. And then he called 911, called me crazy over the telephone, used his 911 emergency call as an excuse to slander me, using his professional position in town and the friends that he's made with the police to get special treatment from these people and leave me hanging and looking like a fool. That happened last spring. And all summer long, these same neighbors have been harassing us at our home. At one point, driving their vehicles up and down the road in front of our home, recklessly, doing burnouts, speeding, whatever they could to get a rise out of me and my wife that live at the home with me, to draw us out of the house so that the police can once again be called down to assist in this corruption. And one night it got so bad, the night before Marshall Homecoming, it was probably midnight, and I heard these same individuals just rolling coal outside of our home and harassing us with their vehicles. They got old junk pickup trucks they run around here. And these individuals, I heard them come by the house, and I saw them take a left turn up the road. So I stepped outside, hoping to see which direction they would go. At this point, I don't even know who's harassing me at this point. So many people's gotten involved that I'm literally harassed by strangers that my neighbors have begged to be a part of this situation. And I got maybe a block away from my home, and they stopped in their vehicle and pulled off to the side of the road. And 3 men got out and assaulted me a block away from my home. And the bad news was I didn't have my camera to record it, so there's no witnesses. And as I was walking home, one of my neighbors came out of their house and began verbally harassing me and assaulting me as I was walking in shame back to my house after getting brutally beaten by 3 men in the road. And they ended up using that as an excuse to put an order of protection on me, to keep me off of their property. And that little scam involves trespassing me off every property around me and forcing me to live in my home and not being able to use any road adjacent to my home. That's how far this corrupt scam has gotten now, to the point where they'll use this corrupt police action to trigger events that will eventually lead to me not being allowed to use city assets like roads and sidewalks. And it's ironic because these same policemen who tell me that my neighbors can flop in a meth sweat in the park next door for as long as they want. They're allowed to come onto my property to harass us. They're allowed to assault my vehicle and me in it. But I don't have the right to use their sidewalk, which is ironic to me. Everybody can use the sidewalk in front of my home to harass my house with, but I can't even use my sidewalk to walk my dog on. So now I'm forced to come to the local state park to walk my dog. After all these charges have snowballed together to the point now where the judge is going to use multiple circumstantial charges as a preponderance of evidence. The prima facie court case built on circumstantial evidence that they've gathered over the last 2 years because they refused to take the case to trial. My own public defender is assisting the local district attorney's office in assessment of charges after the fact, after I've been arrested. District attorney in my town is named Kyle Hudson. And as a child, he was playing sports ball in my backyard with my little brother. And came outside with a soda bottle. I was probably 9 or 10 years old at the time. And he decided to bully me by slapping the bottle out of my hands and forcing it into my left eye. And I received 6 stitches from the abuse I received. My mom took me to the local health clinic and we got stitches, and nothing was ever said after that. No charges were filed. Nothing happened. And 35 years later, the same individual is now the district attorney of Marshall, and he's continuing his bullying and his harassment using the professional job and the family ties he has in the community as an excuse to continue to relentlessly harass an innocent victim into court, to brag that he has these family connections. That's the only reason why he's doing it, is to prove to the community that this is their town. And that's what happens to people like me that move in where they're not wanted. I have 4 family members I've traced to the Holocaust who died in the Holocaust. I'm technically a Jew living in a Nazi town in southern Illinois because my eye doesn't work properly now because it was nearly poked out by the district attorney 30 years ago. And now he's just coming back to finish the deal. Aren't my freedoms protected in the Constitution as well as theirs? And it's gotten to the point now where they'll use these dog walks and claim that I'm doing illegal activity while I'm walking my dog because I don't have a witness. And when it got to that point this year where they started to complain to the local police that while I'm walking my dog, I'm vandalizing their homes or whatnot, the truth of the matter is it was just them trying to get us back into that corrupt courthouse again. At no time have I ever done anything illegal with my dog other than what you're seeing here. Just letting her run and play in the road. This is what she loves to do. And ironically, all this started as soon as we bought this dog. Once I made myself known in the community, walking this pretty dog around, that's all it took for my jealous neighbors, who are victims of the drug trade themselves here in town. That's all it took for them to get involved in the sadness that they brought onto my community. They're using the local park next door to my home to stage a protest using their front yards. They've placed signs in their yards, and they're spotlighting our home with spotlights at night. And the police know that it's happening, and they refuse to do anything about it. because it initially started because they had had a strobe light in their front window that they were shining at the back of our home. And I called the police and I asked them to come down and ask these people to turn off their strobe light because they were strobing the light at our house. They wanted to make it look like it was a police siren, and they were trying to harass me with this strobe light because they wanted to trick the neighbors into thinking that there was a police presence at our home. The officer that came to our home that night, his name is Officer Branson, and he is involved multiple times in this affair to support the claims that my neighbors make. And he came down that night and they all had a big laugh about it. They didn't do anything about it. They walked off onto their private property to talk about this, to trick this officer into taking their side of the story. And the 4 individuals that were responsible for this strobe light attack were all drunk. They were day drinking at the time, and they just had a wild hair up their ass to do this to harass us. And Officer Branson came down that day and didn't do a damn thing to help us. In fact, it only made it worse because now that they have police permission from this Officer Branson, they took the harassment to the next level now that they had the police support. And they installed a number of spotlights onto the outside of their home, probably 3 or 4 spotlights that point at our house and shine on our house. And it lights up our house like it was daytime. I went to complain about that, and they're using a loophole in our local city ordinances to refuse to get involved in that situation. And the third party that writes our city ordinances have included a light harassment clause in other cities' ordinance policies that do business with them. And ironically, Marshall isn't one of those cities. So now that we know that the lights aren't covered under the law, the police use the arbitrary powers that dirty badge gives them to allow these people to continue to harass us at our home. They say if you don't like it, you can call the state police, and you can call the state's attorney's office. You can call whoever you want, and no one's going to help you, because we're the police in this town, and we're the ones that wear the badge. And if you don't like it, you can just move to somewhere else. If the harassment that they are involved in gets bad enough, they demand that I move. And if I don't move, they're going to come out into my house and they're going to drag me out and make me move anyway. Whether it's to the local state penitentiary or to some other address. Not because I've done anything wrong, simply because this family of neighbors is on a power trip now. And since this whole city is involved in this little power trip that's going on, they're all feasting off of it like some sort of corrupt leech. And they're just having so much fun getting to violate the rights of an individual to the point where they can brag about it in court. And they can use the judge to seal the deal and put a lid on it. If you think Jesse Smollett is guilty, then you haven't lived in the state of Illinois long enough to know what corruption looks like. These are the best times for my dog right here, walking in this park. She's on the hunt for a squirrel. The real victim of this whole affair has been this poor dog, who's been a witness to several physical attacks against both of us. She's nearly been ran over 3 times by the city of Marshall in the past 2 times that it's happened over the course of 2 years or so. I've tried to file a complaint with the city of Marshall, and that's led to, once again, a refusal of service. The city of Marshall offices claim that it's a police matter and that I should call the police. And then when I call the police, they say, well, this is a matter of the city. This is a city ordinance. This is a city problem. If you have a complaint with the city, you need to talk to those people. So what they're doing is they're saying, don't call us, call somebody else, because we're not going to help you. And we know that those other people aren't going to help you, so we're just going to send you on a goose chase. And like I said, this small Marshall town, Marshall, Illinois, it's owned by the Republicans to the point where you won't get elected in town if you're not from the right party, if you don't shake the right hands. And it's just a sick little town to live in. I was completely oblivious of all of this up until about 3 or 4 years ago. Now that I know, and it's created so much of a trauma in my life, and it's cast such a dark shadow on the legal system and the police enforcement in this state, that I should be awarded damages because they've ruined the way I view police and law enforcement in general. And Illinois has had such a bad record in the past for wrongful sentencing, for convicting innocent men, that the only way to do it properly is to have everybody on board at the courthouse. The county clerk's office must be on board. The district attorney's office must be on board. The sheriff's department is involved because they're the ones that police the county courthouse. The city is involved now because they're the ones that are dragging this all into the courthouse in the first place. They're the facilitators of this harassment. And I'm writing this down as a record now because in case you don't hear from me again, you'll know what happened to me. This is my silent record of the truth. And when you come to the court armed with nothing but the truth, a corrupt courthouse like mine has no choice but to use corrupt court actions to delegitimize the value of my evidence, to cast me into a bad light so that my evidence will be more easily discounted. By not allowing me the right to a speedy trial, they can let these corrupt charges build up to the point where they can use the number of charges as an excuse to claim that they're genuine, simply because, well, we have so many charges on you, surely this can't be a fluke. Now we have all of this that we can use against you. And it doesn't really matter, because when you stack one corrupt wrongful arrest on top of another, there really is no escape. It's simply a matter of a corrupt family bureaucracy in my small town taking the steps necessary to protect the system that has enriched them to the point where they have this power that they can use. And if I question that power and get it taken away from them, then they no longer have that avenue of revenue that their families have been feasting on for the last 200 years in my town. Because some of these families go back hundreds of years. They've literally inbred in the same spot over hundreds of years, to the point where if you're an outsider and you walk into this neighborhood, you are not going to get a fair shake. Simply because you're not related to anybody. There's nobody here to take your side. What you got, Abby? You got something? I think we caught a squirrel. Anyway, I just wanted to take the time today to clear my chest. I'm going to have to edit this down tonight. But it's time we set the record straight. I haven't talked on my channel, my YouTube channel, this whole time. All you've seen is strange videos that try to show a corrupt police action. And it does. But without context and without background, you have no idea what's going on. And unfortunately, the judge can even step in and say, well, we're not going to allow that context or that background to be a factor in your trial. We're simply going to take everything the way it is. And we're not going to allow any evidence from you whatsoever that doesn't support the case we're trying to make against you. And it's gotten to the point now where my district attorney is sitting on evidence the same way Ahmaud Arbery's district attorney sat on evidence, the same way Emmett Till's courthouse sat on evidence, the same way. There's been so many. I have a girlfriend that works as a title property examiner, and she's in that same courthouse once a week, and she refuses to get involved in my court case because her job requires her to be a third party. I found a pencil. Awesome. Dixon Ticonderoga. That her job allows her to be at that courthouse to do investigations over property-related issues. And she's afraid to be a witness because it might ruin what little bit of a income we do have at the moment. And knowing that if she were to speak up on my behalf in court, and really on her behalf, because she's also one of the victims of all this harassment as well. The police refuse to admit it. But the family that I share that home with are also victims of all this harassment. And if we step up in court to defend ourselves, now we're in a situation where my girlfriend's job could be jeopardized because she's choosing to stand up and fight a corrupt courthouse in town. And it's the same courthouse she has to go to and work at every day. She works for a separate entity that has to go to the courthouse to investigate public records in regards to land ownership, property title issues, property boundary issues. She's one of the reasons that I know that I haven't trespassed on property is because I have special access to records, public records, that I can use to show where property lines are, where property boundaries are. And it's all just a big scam at this point. Up until 4 years ago, I was a model citizen. I served honorably in 2 separate branches of the military. I served in 2 foreign wars. I'm a veteran in my hometown. I'm an Illinois veteran. I left Illinois to serve my country, and I returned home, which granted me special Illinois veteran status. And I still can't get the benefit of the doubt from my local community because the corruption is so embedded and inbred that there's simply no escape. It doesn't matter what federal job you've had in the past. If these meth heads that are friends with the police want to drag you into court, and if you're not friends with the police, you don't have a choice. That's just simply how it is. And, you know, this is the thanks I get. The police in my town, they were never in the military. They went to community college. They went to community college with the promise that they would get a special badge that they could use against other people, that it could elevate them to a professional status where they now have the authority to use this corrupt badge to violate others' rights with. And just this last week, as I was walking my dog in the park next door, it was raining out that night, 7 p.m. at night. My neighbors have a loudspeaker system installed in their home. And when I get close to their home, or what they consider close, which is me being at the park next door, that's as close enough for them. They began slandering me and using this loud system to violently attack me at 120 decibels. That was probably Tuesday night. Well, no, it wasn't. It was over the weekend. Last weekend, sometime. And when I called the police to my house, they immediately come to the door and demand entry and claim that I had said something over the telephone to make their dispatcher mad. And the reason that they came to my home wasn't because of this harassment that I just witnessed and called the 911 office about. This was about trying to trick me into a situation where the dispatchers could claim they had been violated over the telephone. And their violation included me demanding equal rights, me demanding fair service and fair treatment, and me telling them that I know that this is all a scam and that they're involved. And they proved it that night by sending 2 policemen to my home to invade my home and to assault me and slander me inside my own home. I tried to explain to this guy that the reason why he was at my home wasn't because of what some silly dispatcher said on the telephone. It was because I was assaulted while I was in the park next door. And they were so adamant, they refused to take a statement from me. They said, "Can I get a fist bump before we leave? Before we leave tonight, after we've completely denied you the right to be protected by the police in our town, can we at least get a fist bump?" And I told the guy at the time, I said, the guy that gets the handshake is the guy that's assaulting me and beating me in the road. And all I get is a fist bump. And with that, he threw his hands up and walked out the door and left. And keep in mind, this officer I've spoke to a half a dozen times in the past. And every time he shows up to my house, it's the same fit of amnesia where he forgets that the last time he was there was because I had called to complain about my car had 2 tires sliced on it. It's just ridiculous. On my YouTube page, you can see instances of the city of Marshall coming to my home with city vehicles to vandalize my property and my vehicles. And when I complained about vandalisms in the past to the city of Marshall, they upped the ante and began allowing their city workers to come to my home to vandalize my property instead. They basically proved that they were going to give me something to complain about. If you think this is bad, just wait till we get involved. If you think this is harassment, just wait. You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till we bring our city workers down to your home to pour gravel on your car, or to back into your vehicle while we're out doing our job, or to run you over with our city trucks while you're walking your dog. Marshall would be better served if they just would come down and build a dog park. But we just haven't got to that point yet. They've taken me from an honorably serving veteran with a job and a family looking to start a life in their community. And over the past 4 years, through corrupt police action and the harassment and assault they've allowed my neighbors to commit against us, they've done this so that it will cast me in a bad light in my community, so that they can slowly take those honorable things that I've done away from me. Now they can call me a loser because I don't have a job and I'm constantly in trouble as an excuse to continue to harass me in their court. He's just some loser. We don't care about him. He doesn't have the family we have because he's not as well connected as we are. Nobody gives a shit about that guy, so we don't give a shit about him either. And that's literally the mindset of my courthouse. Over the last 4 years, they have tarnished my reputation to the point where they can use that to discredit my evidence, to cast me in a bad light long enough. It's very sad that a community that I grew up in and I prided myself in being a part of, I I was in high school band. I played all the instruments in band. And I supported the football team. I graduated in the top 20% of my class. I went on to college in the Navy and did my own thing, always thinking that in the back of my mind, I was very proud of this town that I'd come from. I thought I'd had it easy compared to some of the other places in the world I could have been born into. And come to find out, it was all a sham this whole time. That once you open your eyes, once the veil's torn away, and you see what this town is really capable of, then that's when it comes time to demand a change, to call for a change. And I realize now that the town I lived in my childhood isn't the same town I live in now, because all of those honorable people that had a hand in raising me in my youth have all died, and they're now replaced with greedy, power-hungry, local inbred families that use their city jobs as an excuse to weed out people from the community that don't want living here.